Hi everyone, welcome and welcome back to Lace's Library, where we read RPG horror stories, and slowly I've been adding a few other things. So today's story is actually 3 from the same person who did the Sacrifice to the Cult Angel Bodyguard one. So this is Alandor 5, and I will put the different titles in the video as we go. Curse of Strahd and the Isekai Protagonist. This was an online play-by-post game of D&D 5e, Curse of Strahd, starting with the Death House. Our characters were recently taken by the mists of Ravenloft and wound up there. Our characters had a short meet and greet scene at the very start where they would be talking about themselves. All of them were from Forgotten Realms or similar D&D-esque worlds. All except one, I'll call Isekai Protagonist. His character's backstory was that he was from the real world, was about to be hit by a truck, of course. Truck-kun! But right before the impact, he was engulfed by the mists of Ravenhold and wound up here. That was all he had to say about it. The character was wearing a black sweatshirt with a hoodie, and said sweatshirt supposedly had a picture of some anime character on it. Don't remember which one. In character, he kept dropping casual references to various anime or movies, or basically anything pop culture related. The character was also a rogue, dual-wielding wakizashi, using stats for short swords, I assume. The game was described to be a regular Curse of Strahd 5e game, but the DM somehow approved this character. Well, whatever. I tried to roll with it, even after it became clear just what this character is, and hoped Isekai Protagonist wouldn't be too annoying. The other players seemed to adopt a similar approach. Well, Isekai Protagonist designates himself as the party leader, and we set off along the road. Eventually, we come across a dead body of a man, and Isekai Protagonist immediately starts looting the corpse. Cleric expresses some discomfort with this, but doesn't stop Isekai Protagonist from doing it, and then proposes the idea that we should bury this dead body afterwards, as it could gain us the favor of his god. Isekai Protagonist immediately starts mocking the cleric, ranting about how gods are stupid and only morons worship them, and demands we move on. The rest of our characters knew that offending the gods is a bad idea, and tell Isekai Protagonist just that. That only makes him double down and insult the rest of us too. We decide to quickly bury the dead body, as it wouldn't take long, and we aren't in a hurry anyway. So why not indulge the cleric's request? Isekai Protagonist gets even more angry, throws some more insults at us, and then storms off. We bury the dead body, having a short role-playing scene for the funeral, and then follow after Isekai Protagonist. We come across an abandoned mansion, Durst Mansion, come inside and reunite with Isekai Protagonist there. Isekai Protagonist wanted us to apologize for being mean to him. We don't, so he runs off upstairs in a huff. That seems like childish behavior. Yes, it does. Usually, adults don't run away from problems. We eventually went upstairs as well and decided to check out one of the rooms there, which was the music room. The musical instruments there start playing, and Fighter fails his save, which means he was forced to dance uncontrollably, while the rest of us are ambushed by enemies, and it seems like it will be a tough battle. Isekai Protagonist shows up, but doesn't help. Instead, he just described his character standing in the doorway, watching the show, and making fun of us during the battle. None of the enemies attack him. This is where the DM did something wrong. They should have attacked him. You should have at least done a stealth roll against, brain. Perception. At least. There's no reason to do that. One of us goes down, but we eventually manage to prevail, even without Isekai Protagonist's help. Afterwards, there's an in-character argument with Isekai Protagonist that eventually found its way into the out-of-game chat. Essentially, we tried to get him to be more of a team player, and said that he should have helped us in that battle. Isekai protagonist kept insisting that it's our own fault for mistreating his character, and eventually started ranting about how horrible we are to his character. The whole time, the DM seemed to ignore out-of-character chat, so I message him and ask him if he could talk to the Isekai protagonist about his behavior, since our efforts are seemingly in vain. The DM replied that it's not his problem. I didn't feel like dealing with this any further, especially if this was going to be the DM's attitude going forward, so I just decided to leave the game. No idea if the game continued afterwards. I hope it didn't continue, because this DM, like, not just the Isekai protagonist, but this DM seems to just not care. Why is he doing a thing if he's not going to actually care about what his characters are doing? Or the players, not characters, I shouldn't have said that. Players. Because, obviously, this guy needs to stop. I don't know. Let's get to the next story. Greedy monk kept secretly stealing the party's loot. The DM went along with it for a long time. Alright, so this was a long time ago. It still kind of baffles me, and I'm not 100% sure about the specifics of how the monk managed to pull this off. I've tried to explain this as best as I could. 1. Game information. It was an online game of D&D 5e, played primarily through voice chat. I was invited to the game by an online friend, who was friends with the DM. The rest of the party was filled up by players who responded to the DM's game ad. This was also a higher level campaign. I think we started at about level 8, and the DM was generous with XP. 2. The monk, the problem player, was playing a tabaxi monk, who's kind of a douche, and also the type of min-maxer who would keep talking about how awesomely his character is designed, how we can't even compare, and would lord it over us from time to time. Still, his douchey tendencies were tolerable, or so we thought. For the longest time, the DM knew better. Monk also had many thief-type skills, and kept bragging about how he's so fast that no one could catch him. He always insisted on going everywhere first to scout, and sometimes just rushed into danger with the rest of the party having to catch up to him. A few times, this got him into trouble. We had to save him, and he always whined that he should have been able to get out of it by himself whenever that happened. When we were in town, or any kind of civilization, he'd also sometimes go off on his own. We didn't think much of it. The DM occasionally role-played separate scenes for each player character whenever there was need for it, and the rest of our characters also sometimes went on their own errands. Monk's character was also the typical insufferable lone wolf, so none of us really wanted to roleplay any more than necessary, and thus didn't inquire further. 3. Trouble is brewing. The trouble began when the DM seemingly began to be very stingy with loot. It has been steadily growing worse over the course of a few sessions. Soon enough, we'd fight through a whole dungeon and see that about half the treasure chests and such would be only half full, or even completely empty, as if someone pilfered them. There were also no magical items found by us for several sessions. Before that, we'd find at least one per session, even if a small one. That was mostly for flavor. It was a very high magic setting. I thought the DM simply decided to be a lot more strict with loot, so I didn't say anything. At one point, we were fighting an undead warlord who stole the ancestral sword of my character's family, but when we got through his castle into the treasury, the sword wasn't there, and again, half the treasure chests were empty. I thought it was simply a plot hook, and the DM will follow back on the sword's real whereabouts later. So, despite the initial disappointment, I didn't give it much thought. The next session, we were supposed to go to some forgotten temple and retrieve some artifact from there. We went inside, and as usual, Monk went first to scout. There were no enemies inside, and as soon as we set out to follow the super fast monk, the DM announced to us that we hear the monk screaming in pain. The monk seemed confused by this, and as soon as we got inside the room the monk was in, the DM narrated that we could see a large statue of the goddess whose temple it is. Underneath it is a large, ornate chest, and there are some runic letters on the chest. And in front of said chest was a monk, now turned into a golden statue. Monk was furious, started an argument with the DM, and it got heated. They eventually took it to a private chat, and unsurprisingly, Monk was out of the game not long after. I was just mostly confused by what had just happened. 4. The DM's reveal. The DM then explained to us that what was written on the chest was a warning that only those blessed by the goddess can open said chest and anyone else will be cursed. He also told us that the monk was apparently stealing from the party for the longest time, in the sense that he was looting treasure from the dungeon whenever he went ahead and keeping some of it for himself without telling the rest of us. Apparently, at first, it was apparently small stuff, like some gold pieces here and there, or an item that looked interesting. He'd then present the rest of the treasure chest's contents to the party, while keeping his hidden stash in the several bags of holding he had. We were all allowed to spend starting gold on magic items, with price based on the rarity. Sometimes, he'd apparently even lock the treasure chest after he took what he wanted from it, to make it seem like he just discovered it. He'd communicate these secret actions with the DM through direct messages, and for the longest time, the DM kept indulging him. Said DM was very into the simulationist approach. He said he didn't want to limit our actions too much, and just wanted to make sure they have realistic consequences. That's the best way I can explain why the DM kept up with it for as long as he did, as I don't really understand why myself. The few sessions where we kept finding suspiciously empty chests were after he started being much less subtle with it and went overboard, taking more things than before, including some magical items the DM meant to be for a particular character that Monk couldn't even use. He apparently mostly sold what he looted in town, or buried it somewhere to presumably pick it up later. The DM seemed to hate the monk by that point. He kept ranting about him and how insufferable he was, and by that point, we all agreed. Apparently, during their secret conversations, the monk kept arguing with the DM about what he's able to do without the rest of the party knowing or not, with notable quotes such as, "It's not fair, I have so much speed that I should be able to loot the whole corridor before they even get here." We got to see what was inside those bags of holding he carried, and there were still several magic items in there. One of said items being the ancestral sword of my character's family. Yes, he stole that one too. The DM wanted to teach Monk a lesson, and that trap chest that turned him into a golden statue was meant to be it. Per what the DM told us, it wasn't meant to be permanent. The goddess whose temple he wanted to steal from would turn him back after a few hours and give him a chance to seek redemption somehow, but the monk left the game, so it was turned into a permanent thing. 5. Conclusion. The rest of us were not that surprised, as Monk seemed to be the kind of guy to do a thing like this. The monk was also particularly insufferable the last few sessions prior, and we were overall just glad he was gone from the game, and we're happy to continue without him. And the game did improve afterwards. That whole situation did leave a bitter taste in my mind though, mostly in hindsight, knowing that the DM knew about it for so long and indulged him for so long without telling us about it. I'm not even sure how exactly he managed to keep it secret from the rest of the party. And the monk wasn't the only one who had a secret plotline. I remember that the sorcerer was heir to some kingdom, which he kept secret from us, and was using the party to get strong and rich enough to help him win his throne back from the usurper. But, as far as I know, he wasn't stealing from the party, nor acting against us in any other way, unlike the monk. I don't want to make it seem like I'm criticizing the DM too much, as he was great otherwise, but I don't think this was handled well. I wish he just had a chat with him to cut this sort of behavior sometime early, and booted him out of the game if he continued doing it. Edit. To make something clear, we did ask questions in character when it seemed relevant, tried to investigate a bit to see if there was something fishy going on, mainly towards the end, but didn't learn much, so moved on. Our party wasn't that good at the relevant skills, except the monk, which is why he didn't really protest when he always wanted to scout. When it came to the castle treasury and the missing sword, we did try to investigate, but there weren't any real clues left there, at least none that the DM let us find, so we ended up assuming that the sword was somehow stolen from there years ago, for all we knew. We had no real leads to go follow regarding it, so put it on a back burner and focused on something else, figuring that a lead might present itself in the future. And we all had side roleplay. That wasn't anything unusual. Monk had more of it, again, not strange since he kept acting like the lone wolf. And if we didn't feel obligated to let him stay for out-of-game reasons, our characters probably wouldn't let him remain part of the group, as he was just generally shady. I feel that part of the issue was a difference of expectations between us and the DM. There was a lot more going on in the game besides the monk stealing some of our loot. This resulted in us being much more interested in different things and focusing on them rather than the mystery of some empty treasure chests and missing loot. If it continued, then we'd likely started paying more attention to it, but after Monk went overboard with this, it didn't last long enough for us to make this our priority. DM was fond of sprawling dungeons with multiple routes. Monsters/enemies would be scattered all about, patrolling and just living whatever life they had, and their prospective treasure could be anywhere. It wasn't just treasure chests, it could be coffins or urns, or whatever made sense too. So there was enough for the monk to grab if he explored the side passages and such. The strange thing is that I don't even remember the monk being split from our group that much. Like, we'd finish a combat encounter, then loot whatever the enemies had on them. Monk generally only looted enemies that seemed like they were important, / could have some cool stuff, or engage some post-battle roleplay and such. Meanwhile, Monk would leave to scout as soon as the battle was over, and rejoin us soon after, telling us what he found. I think that the DM was kinda lenient with him, and let him accomplish more than he should be able to. Probably because Monk kept whining whenever something didn't go his way. By the time the golden statue incident happened, the DM seemed to dislike him even more than the rest of us. Vampire, the Masquerade, and the Prince's Pet Wolf. This happened on some play-by-post site years ago. We were playing Vampire, the Masquerade, 20th Anniversary Edition. We were all a bunch of neonates, newly turned vampires, serving the Camarilla, a global vampire organization that basically rules over all vampires, or at least tries to, in San Francisco. Some small group of renegade vampires was causing trouble, and the prince, the highest ranked representative of the Camarilla in the city, wanted us to investigate them and get rid of them. This was explained to us during a meeting with the prince. In the middle of this meeting, some half-naked guy wearing a spiked dog collar, crawling on all fours and holding a dog leash with his teeth, comes inside. He brought the dog leash to the prince. The prince dismissed him with a, "Don't worry, I'll take you out for a walk soon." It was very weird, but this was Vampire the Masquerade, so some amount of weird is expected. The storyteller resumed the meeting in the same post, so we all kind of brushed it off. So we go investigate. This part is mostly uneventful. We basically learn that the renegade vampires the prince wants us to take care of had their hideout on Alcatraz Island. So we report back to the prince. When we come in, the prince is petting said half-naked man with a dog collar, who is licking his face like a dog. We try our best to ignore this weird presumed ghoul, basically a type of vampiric servant, and tell the prince what we've learned. After we told the prince everything, he turned to the guy with the dog collar and said that he's going to take him out for a walk tomorrow. And the storyteller pointed out that while he was saying that, he glanced at us with an evil smile. So, the next night, we were supposed to go to the hideout on Alcatraz Island to deal with the renegade vampires. The dog collar guy doesn't show up this time, to everyone's relief. The prince insists we use a specific boat he gave us for reasons to get there. Due to the prince's odd behavior, we were suspecting that he's setting up some kind of trap for us or intending to sacrifice us in some way to achieve his goals. So, we mutually agreed that if something shady happens, we just get the hell out and try to go to a different city. During this time, the storyteller kept mentioning that there's a full moon in the sky, and he kept repeating it over and over. Now, it might seem obvious that he was setting up something related to werewolves with the full moon, but the werewolves in World of Darkness don't work that way. Werewolves in that world are basically a whole species of shapeshifters that can shift forms at any time they want, and full moons just make it slightly easier for them to lose control and go berserk. And they generally have better things to do than to get involved in vampire affairs. Another thing was that vampires and werewolves in World of Darkness belong to very different power levels, and even a starting werewolf could take out our whole group and probably also the prince at the same time, in 1 or 2 rounds. So, we didn't really expect the storyteller to just casually throw one in at the very start of the game. Anyway, we got to the hideout, which was located in some underground tunnels beneath Alcatraz prison. After wandering around those tunnels for a bit, we make it to a large room, and the prince is there, waiting for us. All around him are remains of dead vampires. The prince was also petting a werewolf in Krynos form. Basically, the pop culture depiction of a werewolf. As soon as he spots our group, he laughs, tells us that he just took his pet out for a walk, then lets go of the leash and sends his pet werewolf after us. Well, it was obvious to us that we stand no chance against an elder vampire and his pet werewolf, so we do the sensible, even if it's seemingly hopeless, thing, and try to flee. The other two players both had celerity, basically vampire super speed, so they managed to run away, while my character was torn to shreds by the pursuing werewolf. They made it to the boat, but they couldn't get it to work anymore, so it was apparently sabotaged just enough to work for a one-way trip. So they jumped into the water and tried to swim back to shore, only to be ultimately torn to shreds in the water by the murderous werewolf who pursued them all the way into the sea. Understandably, the way this happened didn't sit well with us. The storyteller seemed to be even more upset than us, though. He told us that even if we managed to get away, he'd dock all of our XP for cowardice. He said that we were all supposed to fight the werewolf. Remember, we are all newly turned vampires, and a werewolf could take out even a group of experienced vampires. And if we proved that we could hold our own against him, the prince would let us live. Apparently, it was supposed to be some test from the prince. For what purpose? Who knows? The prince never said anything like this in character. We only learned it from the storyteller later. Anyway, the storyteller ended up deleting the game because none of us wanted to play anymore. As for the werewolf, there were no weirdly detailed descriptions or anything like that, and from what I remember of what the storyteller said after our characters all died, he seemingly just thought it would be funny to have the werewolf literally act like a pet dog. It wasn't. It was just weird. Okay, so that was 3 stories from Landor 5. The last one, it was really weird. Having the werewolf as a human, just being pet as a human, I'm sorry, that would like creep me out immediately. And it did seem a bit stupid to send out a full-blown werewolf at super new characters, so that was another issue that the DM did. But I would like all of your opinions on these 3 stories down in the comments. And if you like this, please like and subscribe, and you'll be able to see more RPG horror stories as we go. Bye!